when I teach, I preach that there is always a why and there's an overarching goal. And if you're not integrating both your goal and your why into your content, you're just cooking sushi over an open flame, which is silly.
Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Post. This week, we talk with Ashley Losch, founder and owner of Blue Helmet Media, a creative consulting agency with a focus on social media, content creation, and more. Ashley started her career as a firefighter nearly a quarter century ago, and as she rose through the ranks, landed in the role of public information officer, where she discovered her love of social media. Ultimately, Ashley left the fire service to start Blue Helmet Media, and in part one of this interview, we uncover the incredible story arc of a firefighter who couldn't imagine working straight 40-hour weeks to someone who now runs a social media agency. Join us as we head behind the post with Ashley Losch. I want to just get the story arc of, number one, how you became a firefighter.
Sure.
And then how you became a public information officer for the fire department and how that ultimately turned into what you're doing with your social media company with,
sure.
With Blue Helmet Media. So if you could kind of just, like I say, you probably get this a lot, but can you kind of just, how did you go from fighting fires and helping people in that way to doing social media management and helping people in that way?
Yeah. I started my firefighting career. I was hired in December of 2000. And, the thought of being on camera or public information was never in my mind. And I will tell you, I love every second of being on a fire truck. It is the best job in the whole world. And I'll never forget when my son was little, you'd be driving him to school or practice or whatever. And he would always say, like, well, what would you do if you weren't a firefighter? And I would say, I'm going to be a firefighter. I'm a firefighter. And he was like, no, but what else would you do? And I was like, there is no better job. There's nothing else that fills me up like firefighting. And now here we are, almost 24 years later. But the journey moved on because I had a friend that was the PIO for my department. And he was like, hey, I need some backups. You want to come in and learn? I think you'd be great. Really early in my career, I did some little Saturday morning pieces on like local news, Channel 3 safety message stuff with one of the older firefighters that had a lot of tenure. He was like, hey, come with me. We'll do this together. It'll be fun. So I did a couple of those. And then my buddy's the full-time PIO. He says, we need some backups. Come in, learn the skill, be a backup. So I was a backup for about 3 years. And then it was time for him to come back to the field. And he said, hey, you're next. And I was like, nope, I have zero interest in being next. I have the best crew. I love coming to work. And I'm trying to help a couple guys promote. Like, I don't want to go to the office. And a 40-hour after 17 years of shift work sounded literally like a fate worse than death. Because when you're used to 24 on, 48 off forever, that's just the way you do things. So 40-hour always felt like a jail. But I went and I fell in love with it. And I will say I didn't know anything about social, literally nothing. I didn't know how to light anything. I didn't know how to take pictures. I didn't know how to do video. Nothing. So the learning curve was steep. I spent a lot of time on YouTube University trying to learn. I mean, I'm talking a 15-hour day of how to light something. I'm video after video after video. What's a key light? How do I do this? What do I do with that? Just to get started. And so if you look at the first year of social, it's pretty bad. I mean, I was struggling, but when I felt that impact for the first time, when I felt the community that we were talking about earlier start to really engage and be moved by the content, that's when I knew this was as important as the work I was doing before, because this could prevent somebody from a tragedy. This could save someone's life or a family's life. This could really help in a new way. And it opened my eyes to the power of it all.
Yeah, I know. I want to go back just a little bit because I know what a public information officer is because I'm in the biz. But for those who are like, "What do you do?" It's like you are 40-hour death week or 40-hour work week for firefighters is a death sentence. If firefighters wanted to work 40 hours a week, they wouldn't be working as firefighters. Period. So nobody wants to go to that 40-hour work week. As a matter of fact, I have a friend coming off one and he's ecstatic.
Yeah.
But public information officers are typically who you see on the news when something horrible happens, or you see them like, it's Christmas, don't burn down your house because you have a dried out tree, or it's Thanksgiving, don't throw a frozen turkey in the oil, that kind of thing. So it's traditionally like inside, just like you said, inside the trucks, inside the doors of the trucks. Nobody wants that job. But it's also a really important job. And one of the reasons why I started following you, which was actually quite a few years ago, was because you do an amazing job at encapsulating what it's like to be a firefighter. It's not just like, here's some safety information. You go into the stations, you interact with the crews, you have a lot of funny content, you have a lot of serious content. It's really like what you do was different than any other public information officer that I had seen. Did the person who preceded you, did they start up any sort of social media accounts, or was that all you? How'd that work?
Yeah. First of all, thank you. That means a lot. The person that I came on after had started, we had a Twitter X, whatever it was, Twitter back then. Really, primarily, we used that for media and to contact them to give timely information. We had an Instagram that had somewhere around 2,000 followers, and we had a Facebook. I can't remember what the following was when I started, maybe 4,000. Facebook was much more prevalent in 2017 when I started working full time for him or as the PIO. And TikTok wasn't even in our purview yet. I did start the TikTok in 2019, maybe 2020, right around the pandemic. And so that was a fresh launch. And then Threads, we started as well.
This is a loaded question. What was, when you would go into the stations to film content, what was the reaction? Because I know, because you have a video that parodied it, but what was the reaction?
That was literally the reaction in the beginning. And if you haven't seen the video, I pull up, I'm like waving at the guys in the kitchen, and they're like, oh no, the PIO's here, right? And I'm walking in with all my gear, and they're like, yeah, we're leaving. I'm like, what do you mean you're leaving? And they're taking off. Not well received in the beginning. People were not interested in engaging. I got a lot of hate internally from the membership, and I'm talking people that were my people, like my tribe, my people that I love dearly and would lay my life down for, were like, yeah, I don't want to engage in any of the stuff that you're doing. And I got a lot of complaints. And to the credit of the fire chief, he eventually just said, I don't want to hear it. She's doing what she's doing, and I told her what to do. She has my permission. Like, stop complaining. And then the success started, and people were starting to see, oh, wow, we're getting some recognition. And oh, wow, we're on the news like once a week. And people really know who we are, and people are excited about the content, and people are excited to see things. And oh, she recognized my crew for some excellent work. And it started to build this momentum. And I'm not going to say people were overjoyed ever, really, to engage in the content. However, there were people that were like, hey, if you need help, I'll help. If you want to spitball ideas, I'll do it. So it slowly but surely became something that more people were interested in helping with. And they saw how much fun we had when we did it. So then they started to want to be a part of it. And even better, people would start creating content and sharing things with me. And that was the pinnacle of it all. It felt really good. So long story short, to answer your question, towards the end of being there, I would call the captain and say, hey, I want to do XYZ. Would you guys be willing to help? Will your crew help? I never ambushed anybody. Everybody knew I was coming. They knew what the thought process was, what we were going to do. I really was thoughtful about not interrupting people's days. If they had training, if they were busy, I would just leave them alone. It was only people that agreed to help that were asked to help.
So, story arc, 17 years on the truck, fighting fires, doing what firefighters do, not thinking about any of this. You're really into that. I'm on 24 hours. I'm off 48. Mm-hmm. Then this opportunity comes up and you start doing it, and you're kind of side-eyeing it when you first started, but then you're like, oh, okay, wait a minute. There's some good that can be done here. And then you actually take the fire departments that you're working with through that to where, I'm not here to put you on blast. I'm here to help you do the things that you do and get recognition for it. So that is a heck of a story arc. But at some point you decided that, you know what, this is what I now do for a living. I'm going to do this thing, to the point to where you've actually left the fire department and started your own agency. So can you kind of just walk us through how you got there?
I was asked to present at a fire chiefs conference. And this was the first time I really had stepped into the space that wasn't my department or wasn't within the departments in our area or within the academy. And, I was being looked at as this outlier, similar to what you were saying, Bodhi. It was like people weren't doing what I was doing. And so there was a lot of skepticism and lack of understanding. Why are you doing this? I'm not going to say there's secrecy surrounding the fire service, but there certainly is the truck of trust, as you referenced before. When those doors close, that's our safe space. And I was never going to violate that. That wasn't the intention. The intention was to help and to spread the word and for people to see who we are, because the department's a really special place and it's filled with really incredible people. And if no one tells that story, right, no one gets to know that. So I get invited to go to this fire chiefs conference to present basically like, why should you have social media and why is this important and why is public information even a part of this world that we work in? And as I was presenting, I realized how few people were actually engaging in this and how much they wanted to know and how many questions they had and how can we implement this and what could we do? And immediately I was like, there is a gap here in the fire service and people need training. They need someone to ask. They need somewhere to go when they want to implement these things. So maybe that should be me. I don't know. And I had worked with a captain in a neighboring fire department that was doing some testing. And I realized their stuff's all online. And if their business is based on how many people apply, and that's how they get paid, if the fire departments have a larger following, then those people are going to have more testing candidates. So there was a direct correlation between followers and money for this company. And so I went to the captain and said, can I take you to lunch and pick your brain? And what do you think of this? And I'd like to work for you and do this for the fire departments. And he said, I'd be doing you a disservice if I let you come work for us. You need to start your own company. And literally that was a Thursday. And on Saturday, Blue Helmet was born.
What is the reference to the blue helmet?
Blue helmet is PIOs wear blue helmets. That's the color. So, right, fire department has 50 different color helmets. There's yellow or black typically for a firefighter, red for a captain, white for a chief. For us, the baby blue helmet was PIO. And
the dreaded green helmet.
Dreaded green helmet, safety officer. Yes.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to do that one.
Show up. Go ahead, Rob.
I was just going to say, so, 3 days later, you start Blue Helmet Media. was your goal to only work with fire departments, or were you looking to say, well, hey, if I can do this for a fire department, I can potentially do it for someone else? You know, was that always the thought when you decided to start, or did you have to get to that point eventually?
Yeah, when I started, it was, I really have no idea what I'm doing, except that I'm super passionate about this and I see a gap and maybe I can help. And I had no inclination as to what it really would end up being. My goal was start an Instagram and a TikTok, see if I can get to 10,000 followers in a year. Meanwhile, how do I present at some fire chiefs conferences? How do I get in front of the decision makers to help impress upon them the necessity of social media for their departments? And how do I help them get started? That really was the beginning. About a month and a half later, a friend that ran a nonprofit was like, hey, could you help me with my social? And I was like, oh, this is my business now. So pretty quickly, I was already outside of the fire service space. It was adjacent, but a nonprofit and a world that I didn't know anything about. So it expanded quickly to answer your question. And now I feel like the strength, the power, the influence of social branches into anything and everything, any industry, any company, anything, anyone. So the possibilities are endless. And I'm excited at the prospect of dipping my toe and my fingers into a more creative process with greater, less parameters and more reach.
I do want to point out like the difficulty that it is to reach like administrators for the fire service, because they're not always old white guys, but there's a lot of them, and they didn't grow up with social media. They grew up in a fire service that didn't talk about their feelings. We don't share this outside of us. So to try and pitch them and be successful at it says a lot to your personality and how you are able to craft a message. So I think that kind of leads us to crafting a message. Like, how do you decide what to post, when to post? Some of your stuff is very silly. Some of your stuff is about mental health. Some of your stuff is just kind of like, it feels random. How do you feel like on what day? Like, I love your stuff. I am a fan. Like you, fighter Fenton. I don't know what's wrong with my voice today, but and Firefighter Chronicles, my 3 favorite accounts in the fire service. How do you decide what you're going to post on that day? Do you have a content calendar? Do you just kind of go with what you feel like?
That is a major company to put me in. So, wow. Thank you. Thank you. When I teach, I preach that there is always a why and there's an overarching goal. And if you're not integrating both your goal and your why into your content, you're just cooking sushi over an open flame, which is silly, right? So there's a plan and there's a why. I have done content calendars in the past, but to be honest, it's generally, I might have perseverated over some ideas and some content, create it and put it in drafts, and then use it when it feels appropriate. Generally, the content is how I feel that day. It's very much about me, but it still has that goal and that why integrated into it. It's just, does this feel like the right day to do this? Now, Sunday's first NFL Sunday, right? And I have content prepared for that because I love football and I'm excited about that. So that's planned out, but not everything's planned. I will say a lot of it is planned. A lot of it is thought out. And I try to get the temperature of what's going on in the world, because I feel like when you schedule things, inevitably, you're going to have some silly content ready to go and someone dies that day. And then you feel really off brand and it's tone deaf to what's happening in the world. So I try not to do that as much.
So it sounds like there's 2 phases to what you do at Blue Helmet. That there's the actual day-to-day, you're creating content to go on the socials. But it also sounds like you spend a fair amount of time actually coaching people up or instructing folks on the benefits of what social media can do for them and do for their business. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, it's more than two. I do logos. I'm really loving graphic design. Again, a skill I didn't know that I had or enjoyed, but the privilege of helping people with a logo that is going to represent their business and their brand is something I do not take lightly, and I just really, really love. So logo creation is one thing that I do. Classes is another, where I'm actually going out and teaching people how to create content, introducing the goals and the why and the value and how to do this and when to do this and where to do this, what platforms you're going to have the most success with video versus photo, and how do you write a caption that's going to be engaging, what's a CTA, right? These sorts of things. So I love the classes. Influencing the decision makers to engage is another piece, like you referenced. But also I have this communications part. So I'm about to complete the Master Public Information Officer program through FEMA. Next week we graduate. And that's really about communications and crisis communications. So learning how to integrate an internal communications plan and an external communications plan for your organization and how vital those things are. People don't realize that they don't have anything ready and they don't know what they're supposed to do until something terrible is going on. And then they go, oh, we literally have a plan for everything else, but not for this. So I offer those services as well. Developing a crisis communication plan, which some companies are charging you hundreds of thousands of dollars to do. I don't charge quite that much, but knowing that there is going to be a crisis that you're going to deal with, especially in a public safety agency, but certainly any agency, and having a plan is so important. So I do that as well. It's really anything and everything that has to do with social and communications and design and creative and all of the fun.
What would you say like the biggest misconception is about the PIO position or what you do at Blue Helmet Media? Because I'm sure people come to you and they're like, I want you to do this, this, and this. And you're like, that's not really the right way to do that. Or that's not what we do here.
I don't know that people have a misconception other than I don't think they know I'm a business. I think similar to Firefighter Fenton, I think they think I just create content and that's what I do. I don't know that they recognize that it's an actual business where there are services. And that's because I don't push that really out on the social so much. It's more if you meet me at a conference or outside of the social space. Some people have DM'd me and said, hey, do you do other things? Or they've checked out the website and they're like, oh, you do that. I also opened a podcast studio this year. I was helping produce some podcasts. And so created a studio and I have that opportunity as well. I haven't pushed that either. It's just sort of more word of mouth. So I think the misconception, to answer your question, is that I just do social, but I do a whole lot more, obviously.
Bodie and I are podcasters. So you may have saw my eyes just brighten up. Oh, you opened up a podcast studio. Can you expound upon that? When you say you opened up a podcast studio, what does that mean? Because that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Sure. So long story short, it had a fun beginning and sort of a sad middle or ending. Some friends came to me and said, I know some people that want to start a podcast. You've been doing this podcast with the department. Could you give them some tips and tricks, sit down with them? Absolutely. So plan for an hour sit down, and 3 hours later of questions and conversation, they're like, hey, would you produce our podcast? And I said, let me think about that. Because where are we going to do that? How does that work? And I had been contemplating integrating a podcast into Blue Helmet as well, because podcasting is my love language. I love this. So I'm envious of what you guys are doing. But after some thought, I went back to the guys and said, what do you think if I build a studio, you you pay to use the studio and for the production, and I'll help with the edit and all of that good stuff. But instead of two people spending the money to purchase all of the items necessary, I'll buy it, and then I can use the studio, rent it out for other people, what have you. And they were like, heck yeah, we're in. So helped them kind of get going. We storyboarded, they came in, we filmed the first episode, and you guys, it was like magic in a bottle. You know, when you're just going, wow, that went perfectly. It was fun. It was engaging. And to be fair, I was not sure about their plan of what they wanted to do, but I was wrong. They were fantastic. And I was on fire to do the next one, like so excited. And then they kept delaying the next one, and then we couldn't make time work, and I went out of town and they went out of town, and I reached out and I'm like, hey, what's up? Are we going? What are we doing? And they're like, oh, we filmed 2 episodes. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? They're like, oh yeah, you want to see them? I'm like, what do you mean? Where, how, what? And I had given one of the guys' wives a list of all the items that I purchased, because she was like, I want to start a podcast too. Well, it turns out they wanted to do it themselves, which is great, but like, just tell me. That would have been fine. So like I said, sort of a sad ending, but now I have the studio. I've used it for I've rented it out for a couple other people, helped them with some production. And I don't know if I'll keep it or what I'll do, or if it's going to extend into using it or not. I'm not even there today, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Interesting story. I can see how that happens. Being a podcast, I've been podcasting for over 18 years now. And there are folks who they want to do everything themselves. There are folks who don't want to do anything other than turn a light on, turn the camera on, and go, and then hand files to someone. So, and then everything in between.
All right, everybody, that is where we're going to end part 1 with our interview with Ashley Losch. If you want to learn more about Ashley, I encourage you to go to bluehelmet.com. That's BLU, no E, helmet.com. I'll also make sure to put Ashley's Instagram and TikTok information in the show notes, as well as the website, just in case you forget. And then if you were like, you know what, I'd really like there to be a part 2 of this interview, you are in luck. There is a part 2. And in part 2, we're going to cover a couple of different subjects. But one of the coolest things that we're going to talk about is community and how important it is to be a good steward of your community. Part 2 of our interview with Ashley will actually be released on September 18th, 2024. Rob and I would like to thank Ashley for being so gracious with her time, and we will see you on the next episode.